Alright, let me ask you this. What's a game recently released that you played and thought, yeah, this is actually fun? Games drop almost every week now, but lately it's the indie and AA games doing the heavy lifting. Sure, we all love a big AAA title with shiny polish, but let's be real. A lot of studios just aren't delivering. Broken launches, rushed ideas, and straight-up half-ass releases have become way too common. But wait, the good part is that indie and AA games don't play around. They've been carrying the industry lately. So in this video, we're diving into some of the best recently released indie and AA gems. Let's go! Evil West is unique and, well, it mixes up cowboys with vampires in a really fun way. You play as a guy named Jesse Rentier, and he is a vampire hunter who works for a secret group that protects the Wild West from monsters. The story is pretty simple, but it is very exciting because you just go from one place to another fighting bad guys and saving the world. The gameplay is awesome. The best part about this game is the fighting. You have a big metal glove called a gauntlet that shoots electricity. You can punch vampires right in the face and watch them fly across the room. It feels really powerful when you hit them. You also have a bunch of guns, like a revolver and a rifle and a shotgun. You can mix up shooting and punching to make cool combos. There is even a flamethrower you can use to burn the monsters. One really fun thing you can do is pull enemies towards you with your electric glove and then uppercut them into the air. Then you can shoot them while they are floating. It makes you feel like a superhero. The game is not an open world where you have to walk around for hours looking for stuff. It is a straight line where you just move forward and fight, which is actually really nice because you never get lost. Why it is fun to play. The graphics look great and the monsters are very scary and gross. Some of them are huge bats and some are ugly vampire monsters that scream at you. The game has a lot of gore, so it is very messy when you win a fight. You can upgrade your weapons and your glove to get stronger as you play. For example, you can make your punches electric so they shock everyone nearby. You can also play this game with a friend. It has a co-op mode where two people can fight the vampires together. This makes the game even more chaotic and fun because you can help each other out when there are too many enemies. It feels like an old school video game from back in the day where fun was the most important thing. If you like action movies and cowboys and monsters, then you will love playing Evil West. A Plague Tale Requiem is not trying to be fun in the normal way. It is a heavy story game that follows two siblings, Amicia and Hugo, in a medieval world that feels sick and cruel. This is a sequel, and it assumes you already know these characters, which makes everything hit harder. Hugo is not just a kid with problems, he is the reason entire cities collapse. The rats are not a monster you fight once, they're a curse that follows him everywhere. Wherever these two go, things slowly fall apart. What makes this game different is how personal it feels. You are not saving the world, you are trying to delay the worst outcome for as long as possible. Amicia is tired, angry, scared, and slowly losing herself as the game goes on. You can hear it in her voice, see it in how violent she becomes. The game does not pretend she's a hero. It shows what happens when a normal person is pushed too far and has no good choices left.
What's happening to me, Lucas?
The gameplay is built around being weak and outnumbered. You do not run in and fight groups head-on. You hide, you plan, and you use tools to control space. Light matters because rats fear it. Fire matters because it is the only thing that keeps death away. Your sling is not a power fantasy weapon. It is a desperate tool. You craft ammo, break armor, blind enemies, and sometimes you just run because that is all you can do. Combat feels messy and stressful on purpose, which fits the story. One of the most impressive things is how the rats work. They are not just a visual effect. They move like a living ocean, reacting to sound, light, and fire in real time. Entire areas become puzzles, built around managing darkness and safety. You are constantly thinking about where you can stand without dying. It creates tension without needing jump scares or cheap tricks.
No.
The world itself is grounded in a twisted version of real history. The plague, religious fear, and blind faith all play a role. People see Hugo as a miracle or a demon depending on what they need to believe. Towns feel desperate, soldiers feel cruel, and nobody feels clean or safe. The game takes its time showing quiet moments too, which makes the violent parts hit harder. Requiem stands out because it commits fully to its tone. It is slow, uncomfortable, and emotional, and it never backs away from that. The voice acting is raw, the animation sells every breakdown, and the ending does not try to make you feel good. If you care about strong characters, serious storytelling, and a game that treats its story with respect, this is one of the best recent AA story games out there.
Stay close to the wall. I'm asleep.
I'm sorry for everything.
Kill that girl!
Kena, Bridge of Spirits. You have to listen to me about this game because it is honestly one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen on a screen. It is called Kena, Bridge of Spirits, and it looks exactly like a Pixar movie that you can actually control. You play as a girl named Kena, and she is a spirit guide, which means she helps ghosts who are stuck in the world move on to the afterlife. It is a little bit sad, but mostly it is just really sweet and exciting. The whole game takes place in this big abandoned village that is surrounded by a forest. Something bad happened there a long time ago, and now the whole place is covered in this gross red and black corruption. Kena has to go to different parts of the forest to find spirits who are lost. These spirits are usually people who have a lot of guilt or anger, and they turned into big scary monsters because they could not let go of their past. You have to learn about their lives and what happened to them so you can help them find peace. It's a really good story about helping people and fixing mistakes.
It's okay. You have to go now.
Okay, so the absolute best part of this game is these little black fuzzy creatures called the Rot. They are these tiny round monsters with big eyes, and they are so cute that you will want to scream. You start with just a few of them, but as you play, you find more and more hiding under rocks and inside chests until you have a whole army of them following you around. You can even find little hats for them to wear, like mushroom caps or fox masks, or even little pancakes. It is adorable. But the Rot are not just for looking cute because they actually help you do everything. When you're walking around, they can pick up heavy statues for you or move blocks so you can climb up cliffs. They're like your little helpers, and they chirp and make funny noises the whole time. You might think this game is easy because it looks like a cartoon, but the fighting is actually pretty tough. Kena has a big wooden staff that she uses to whack enemies. You can do light hits and heavy hits, and you also have a blue bubble shield to block attacks. Later on, you get really cool powers like turning your staff into a magic bow and arrow or using it to throw spirit bombs that blow up the bad guys. The Rot help you fight too. You can tell them to swarm a monster to distract it so you can hit it from behind. You can also use them to make a giant spirit hammer or a super powerful arrow. The boss fights are really intense, and you have to be fast and smart to win. It feels so good when you finally beat a huge boss and turn them back into a peaceful spirit. You need to play this game because it just feels good to be in that world. The music is amazing and sounds like something from a movie. The forest is bright and green, and when you clear the corruption, everything turns beautiful again. It's a mix of exploring and solving puzzles and fighting monsters. If you like games like Zelda or just like watching animated movies, then Kena, Bridge of Spirits is perfect for you.
This land can be weird, but you cannot stay here, Spirit.
Lies of P is completely turning the story of Pinocchio on its head. This is not the cute Disney cartoon version at all. This game is dark and scary and really difficult to play. You play as Pinocchio himself, who is actually a puppet robot, and you wake up in this huge city called Krat. Krat was once a beautiful place, like Paris, but now everything is ruined because all the other robots and puppets in the city went completely crazy and started killing everyone. Your goal is to find your creator, Geppetto, and try to stop this whole mess. The world of Lies of P looks like something out of a creepy old painting. Everything everything is dusty and foggy and there are these huge gothic buildings everywhere. You spend a lot of time walking through dark streets and sewers and abandoned opera houses, and it is a very dangerous place to be. You have to be super careful because every corner is hiding a scary robot or a giant puppet monster just waiting to smash you into pieces. The atmosphere is thick and heavy, which makes it feel really tense every time you step into a new area. The main thing about this game is the fighting, and I have to warn you, it is seriously tough. You have to learn how to block and dodge attacks perfectly or you will die very quickly. You use all sorts of crazy weapons that are made up of two parts, a handle and a blade. You can mix and match these parts to make your own custom weapon. For example, you can put a big heavy axe head on a quick sword handle and see how that works. This lets you play around with different fighting styles. Pinocchio's left arm is also special because it can be switched out for different tools, like a flamethrower or a giant harpoon that pulls enemies closer to you. It is called the Legion arm, and it is very useful for getting out of tight spots. The whole concept of lying is a big deal in the game too. As Pinocchio, you get choices to either tell the truth or to lie to the people you meet. These choices actually change the story, and they affect what kind of puppet Pinocchio becomes. The more you lie, the more human he becomes, which is a really cool and unique idea for a game. If you like a challenge, and you like games that make you feel like you really earned your victory against a huge, scary boss, then Lies of P is a game you absolutely must try. It is a fantastic game with a very dark style and a lot of depth to the combat.
Found beyond your imagination.
Come back to me, Carlo.
You stole my sister from me, rotten puppets! Be careful, Avalon.
Remnant II is basically what happens when you take a Soul-style game and strip out the artsy nonsense, then mix it with guns, co-op chaos, and real build freedom. The world is broken, strange, and stitched together from different realities, and the game does not stop to explain everything in long cutscenes. You wake up, things are already bad, and you are thrown into hostile worlds where nothing wants you alive. The biggest thing that makes Remnant II stand out is how different every playthrough can be. Maps are semi-random, bosses change, side stories shift, and even major events can play out in totally different ways. Two people can play the same world and see different bosses, different endings, and different rewards. That alone makes it feel less like a one and done game and more like something you keep coming back to. Combat is where the game really shines. This is not just a shooter, and it is not just a Souls game either. You aim, dodge, manage stamina, and read enemy patterns at the same time. Enemies hit hard, healing is limited, and mistakes are punished. Guns feel heavy and useful, not like backup weapons. Melee exists, but most fights are about positioning, timing, and staying calm when everything is going wrong. The class system, called archetypes, is deep without being annoying. You pick a main role like handler, medic, challenger, or gunslinger, and later you can mix two together to create your own playstyle. You can build a tank that never goes down, a support that keeps the team alive, or a damage monster that melts bosses fast. Gear actually matters, and small changes can completely change how the game feels. The worlds themselves are weird in a good way. One area feels like a dying fantasy kingdom, another like a sci-fi nightmare, another like a swamp filled with decay and madness. The lore is there if you care, but the game never forces it on you. You learn the world by fighting through it, listening to NPCs, and seeing how messed up everything has become. Remnant 2 also works great in co-op. Playing with friends turns tough fights into controlled chaos, but the difficulty stays fair. Bosses do not become pushovers, and teamwork actually matters. At the same time, the game is fully playable solo, which is rare for this kind of design. This is not a cinematic story game, but it does something many big games fail at. It respects the player's time, trusts them to learn, and rewards skill instead of handholding. If you want a recent AA game with deep combat, replay value, and no filler, Remnant 2 is one of the strongest releases in its space. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Let's talk about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 because this game is doing something really special and very different from every other big budget role-playing game out there. The core idea here is historical realism, and I mean serious realism. This isn't just a fantasy world with castles and swords. The developers, Warhorse Studios, built this game with the help of historians to recreate the Kingdom of Bohemia in the year 1403, which is now the modern-day Czech Republic. When you walk into the major city of Kuttenberg, which was a huge silver mining hub, you are seeing a digital version of what that place looked and felt like 600 years ago. It's a level of historical detail that's almost obsessive, right down to the clothing people wear, the kinds of food they eat, and the actual political turmoil of King Wenceslas IV fighting his own brother Sigismund. You are in the middle of a real civil war that actually happened. You continue to play as Henry, who started as a peasant blacksmith's son in the first game. This time, he is no longer a total nobody. He's on a quest for revenge that gets him swept up into a much larger conflict of nobles and monarchs. The story is a deep dive into the lives of real historical figures, which makes the whole narrative feel grounded, heavy, and very human. Henry still doesn't have any magical powers. He's just a guy who needs to eat, sleep, keep his clothes from being covered in blood and mud because people will judge you for your poor appearance, and figure out how to survive. Now let's talk about the unique gameplay mechanic that sets this game apart, the combat system. It is famously difficult and very rewarding. It is not just about button mashing. It is a directional sword fighting system where you have to think like a real swordsman. You aim your attacks and blocks in 4 different directions, up, down, left, and right, and you have to match your opponent's moves. If an enemy swings down from the top right, you have to aim your block up and right in the fraction of a second you have. It takes practice with a trainer to get good, and you will get your butt kicked a lot by simple bandits at first, which actually makes Henry's progression feel earned. They've also added things like early primitive firearms, like a slow-loading musket, and crossbows, which bring a new layer to battles. Even though those guns are inaccurate and take forever to reload, it just adds to that feeling of being in a genuinely rough, developing time period.
Ha! Now I've got you.
The role-playing elements are also much deeper this time. Your dialogue options aren't just based on your raw speech score. They are influenced by 3 separate traits like oratory, charisma, and intimidation, plus a new layer called appearance, which means if you show up to talk to a duke wearing raggedy, blood-stained clothes, you will not be taken seriously, and your dialogue choices will be limited or even fail entirely. This whole system means you are constantly making choices, from stealing to being a virtuous knight, and every single action affects how the people of Bohemia see you. The developers really put an incredible amount of work into making the game world react to you, and it's that uncompromising commitment to historical detail and challenging realism that makes Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 one of the most important new role-playing games coming out. Dispatch is one of those games that feels like a weird, funny TV show you play instead of just watch, and it's been a surprise hit in 2025. It was made and published by Ad Hot Studio, a small team built by people who used to work on Telltale game stuff back in the day. That old Telltale vibe, where choice and dialogue matter more than twitch reflexes, is baked right into how Dispatch works and feels. The game dropped in October 2025 in a weird but cool way. Instead of releasing the whole thing at once, 8 episodes came out over a few weeks, kind of like a TV series you wait on each week. By November 12th, 2025, all episodes were available, and that means you can now jump into the full story from start to finish.
You have a lot left to give. I would like to make you an offer.
In Dispatch, you play Robert Robertson III, also known as the washed-up hero Mecha Man. His giant mech suit got wrecked, his reputation is in rough shape, and now he has to work at the Superhero Dispatch Network, SDN, which is basically a superhero office where you send other powered people out on missions instead of being the one in the field yourself. Robert isn't just giving orders though, he's dealing with his own sense of purpose while managing a chaotic team of misfits, including reformed villains and quirky personalities. The story leans really hard into comedy story and character work. It's not this somber moral epic with deep lectures about good and evil. It's more about office drama in a world full of superpowers where choices you make in conversations actually shape how characters feel about each other and how things unfold. People talk, you respond, and sometimes what you say changes later scenes in subtle or big ways. The dialogue has real energy, partly because of the voice cast, which includes Aaron Paul, Jeffrey Wright, Laura Bailey, Moist Critical, Jack Septaikai, and others who bring the characters to life in a way the writing alone doesn't always do on its own.
Is that your car?
I don't have a car.
That's gonna be a weird insurance claim.
Gameplay isn't about fighting and shooting. You spend most of your time looking at the SDN map, deciding which heroes to send to what crisis, trying to match their strengths, weaknesses, personalities, and cooldowns to the job at hand. It's like a light strategy game smashed into a narrative adventure. There are also hacking minigames and occasional quick-time events to break up the conversation sequences and dispatch decisions, but it's never about crazy action. Something else worth pointing out is how the episodic structure really drove the conversation around this game. People weren't just playing and moving on, they were talking online about what happened last week's episode, guessing endings and theorizing about what choices would matter most. That doesn't happen with every game, but Dispatch tapped into it because its storytelling is built like a serialized show.
He's so fucking proud of the man you've become. He told me that.
What's wild is how much traction this game got for such a focused idea. It sold over 2 million copies in its first month, even without launching on every console yet, which is huge for a narrative-driven, indie-leaning title. That success has even got the developers talking about a possible second season down the line. That's basically Dispatch Season 2 if all the stars align. So Dispatch is not a typical superhero game where you punch stuff or save the world. It's a story-first experience where you manage people, deal with weird situations, and watch how your choices shift relationships and outcomes. If you like games that feel like interactive stories with some strategy and strong voice acting, this one deserves a spot on your list.
You're right at home behind that desk because you're no hero. You're a nerd playing a video game in a suit your daddy built.
Clair Obscur Expedition 33. If you are looking for an absolute must-play role-playing game that just hit the market, you need to stop scrolling and check out Clair Obscur Expedition 33. This game is the phenomenal debut title from Sandfall Games, and it immediately sets a new bar for how stunning a turn-based role-playing game can look. The entire project is visually jaw-dropping because the developers decided to render everything using a style inspired by 19th century French Romanticism and Impressionism. This means the world is unbelievably beautiful, lush, soft, and vibrant, looking like a living painting, which creates this incredible, eerie contrast with the desperate, apocalyptic story. The whole premise is immediately gripping and deeply tragic. The world is facing a slow, agonizing end thanks to a powerful villain called the Paintress. Her power is horrifyingly simple. Every year, on her birthday, she appears and magically subtracts 1 year of age from every single person on the planet. Your group, the titular Expedition 33, are the final, desperate attempt to find and stop her before the entire human race hits age 0 and simply fades away. That ticking clock hanging over the world gives every single mission and conversation a real, palpable sense of urgency that you don't often get in these kinds of games. Now, let's get into the mechanics, because the combat is the reason this game is blowing up right now. It takes the classic turn-based system and amps up the adrenaline. It's an active turn-based system that absolutely demands your attention and skill. You aren't just selecting options from a menu and sitting back. Whenever an enemy attacks one of your 4 party members, a small, quick time prompt appears on the screen, and you have to hit the correct button or direction at the exact moment of impact to successfully parry, block, or dodge the blow. Nailing the timing is critical, because a perfect parry can drastically reduce damage and give you an immediate counterattack chance. The same timing-based inputs apply to your offensive moves. To maximize the damage or trigger the powerful secondary effects of your abilities, you often have to hit a sequence of buttons or hold a press in a specific rhythm. This means every battle, from minor skirmishes to the gigantic multi-stage boss fights, which are visually spectacular by the way, is a highly engaging test of reflexes and rhythm. You're constantly managing your party's unique skill trees, making sure their equipment is optimized, and mastering the timing of the parry system. It's a game that respects both the strategic depth of traditional role-playing games and the skill-based satisfaction of an action title, making it a powerful experience that feels genuinely new in the current gaming landscape. Blueprints, because it is the kind of game that completely takes over your brain. It's not a secret anymore. This thing came out from solo developer Tonda Ross, working under the studio Dogu Bomb after a crazy 8-year development, and it immediately became one of the most talked about indie puzzle games of the year. If you like games that force you to take notes, draw maps, and think like a detective, this is your jam. The whole premise is that you, playing as Simon P. Jones, have been willed a mysterious mansion called Mount Holly Estate by your great-uncle Herbert S. Sinclair. But there's a huge catch. You only get the inheritance if you can locate the elusive Room 46. The house is built on a sort of impossible architecture that shifts constantly, and this is where the genius of the game lies, borrowing ideas from tabletop drafting games and classic puzzle books. This game is a roguelite, which means you're going through constant runs, but every run is actually called a day. You start each day in the entrance hall with a few resources and a certain number of steps, literally how many rooms you can enter before you have to call it a night and reset. When you open a door, you're given a choice of up to 3 blueprints, and each blueprint is a different room you can add to the mansion's current layout. The map is blank until you draft it. This isn't random generation in the normal sense. The rooms themselves are hand-designed, but you decide the order and connection of the map every single time.
A world of dreams.
What you're really doing is managing a limited number of resources and prioritizing what you need. You might need to draft a puzzle room to solve a lock, or a resource room to gain more gems or energy to keep your run going, or perhaps a room with an important clue about the mansion's unsettling history. What you learn on one run, like a safe code hidden in a specific room's description, you keep forever, and that permanent knowledge is what allows you to make deeper progress in future runs. It is that perfect blend of frustrating short-term failure and satisfying long-term progression that defines the best roguelites. The atmosphere is incredible too. It's a first-person experience where you are alone in this huge, silent, eerie place, and the focus is entirely on the environment and the text clues left behind. The story involves the disappearance of a local children's book author, political intrigue, and deep family secrets, and the only way to unravel it is to pay attention to every single detail in every single room you draft. The fact that the entire house is literally built by your decisions makes it one of the most unique and highly rated indie games in a long time. It's a game that respects your intelligence, and if you're up for a complex mystery, this is easily one of the best out there.
From the 46th room of my 45-room estate.
Hollow Knight Silksong is a sequel that spent like 6 years in development, and you can feel that time in every corner of the game. Team Cherry, this tiny 2-person studio from Australia that somehow made one of the most polished indie games ever with the first Hollow Knight, basically took everything they learned and pushed it way further. Unlike Hollow Knight, where you play the Knight, a mostly blank slate character, here you're Hornet, a fully realized character with speed, personality, and tools that make the game feel completely different. People expected a bigger version of Hollow Knight, but Silksong is smarter. It's not just bigger, it's leaner, sharper, and way more alive. You start off in Phantom Hive, which is a kingdom totally separate from the first game's Hollow Nest. It has all the same vibes, tiny insects with big personalities, creepy ruins, towns that feel lived in, but everything is more vertical, more layered. Hornet can climb walls, swing with her silk thread, dash through enemies, and chain all of it together in ways that feel fluid but also punishing. The combat is hard, but it's the kind of hard that makes you feel like you actually improved when you finally beat a boss instead of dying hundreds of times for no reason. Timing, positioning, learning enemy patterns, it's all there. But now you're also using movement as part of combat. You're not just hitting, you're weaving in and out, using your silk, bouncing off walls, juggling combos while keeping an eye on multiple enemies. The world is enormous and dense. There's no empty filler. Every area has secrets, NPCs, story bits, and environmental storytelling that actually matters. Unlike the first game, Silksong adds more verticality and exploration tools, ropes, silk swings, and new abilities that let you access areas that aren't just hidden, but feel like real shortcuts or alternate paths. The dungeons and mini-boss areas are tightly designed, often forcing you to combine movement and combat in clever ways. There's also crafting and gathering now, which changes how you approach fights and exploration. You might stock up on tools, buffs, or consumables that actually make a difference without feeling like a cheat. Team Cherry clearly learned from Hollow Knight's popularity, but didn't just try to remake it. The story is more visible this time too. Hornet is not silent, the NPCs are more expressive, and you get little character beats that slowly build her backstory and the history of Phantom Hive. The first Hollow Knight was more about figure it out and atmosphere, but Silksong blends that with actual character-driven storytelling while still keeping the player in control. The art style is back, hand-drawn and meticulous, and somehow it feels richer and more alive than the first game, which is insane considering how good the first one already looked. Enemies are creepy, weird, and memorable. Bosses are brutal but fair, and there are more ways to fight, more tools, more attack types and combos that let you experiment. And the soundtrack, again by Christopher Larkin, is incredible. It doesn't just play music, it sets mood, tension, and emotional beats perfectly. What's unique about Silksong is that it doesn't just feel like an indie sequel trying to cash in. It's carefully crafted with a clear philosophy. Exploration and skill matter. The world is alive, and every death or retry teaches you something. It respects your intelligence, rewards observation, and gives you a sense of growth beyond just stats. You feel like you're becoming Hornet, not just grinding through rooms. This game is basically a modern indie masterpiece. It shows what a tiny studio can do in 2025 when they focus on polish, creativity, and respect for players. It's hard, beautiful, full of lore, and surprisingly deep mechanically. If you are into games that make exploration, combat, and story feel like one continuous, meaningful experience, Silksong is everything people have been hyped for, and then some. Hades 2 is the sequel to one of the most talked about indie games of the last decade, Hades, and it finally hit its full release on September 25th, 2025 after a long period in early access. This is a big deal because Supergiant games almost never make sequels. Before this, they were known for Bastion, Transistor, Pyre, and the first Hades, all of which were standalone titles that never got follow-ups. So seeing them tackle a true sequel with everything expanded and polished feels like a milestone for smaller studios doing big ideas. Right from the start, Hades 2 feels familiar but different in all the right ways. You are no longer Zagreus, the guy from the first game. Now you play Melinoë, the princess of the underworld and sister of Zagreus, and she's on a mission to take down Kronos, the titan of time. That already sets the tone. This isn't just another run through the same underworld, it's a deeper mythic journey with higher stakes and a world that keeps spreading out the more you play. The game is a roguelike action RPG, which means almost every run you do through the world is different, but your experience and upgrades carry forward in ways that make each attempt feel meaningful. Melinoë can pick up all kinds of weapons, spells, and abilities, and each playthrough you mix and match them in new ways. You'll get powers from the Olympian gods, but this time there's magic and witchcraft built right into combat, letting you bend the battlefield in ways the first game never did.
But I am well aware how
The combat stays super fast and fluid. You hit enemies, dodge attacks, dash around danger, and build up really chaotic combinations that can explode into insane moments. But what's cool is that the combat never feels random. The weapons all feel different, and the synergy between spell and sword is much deeper than the first game. You feel like you're crafting your own playstyle more than just grinding the same build over and over. The world itself is bigger too. The first Hades kept you mostly underground moving up, but Hades 2 sends you across new biomes, including places on the surface and mythic regions tied to gods and monsters that we've only heard about before. There's a clear sense of progression, but not in a boring linear way. You explore, get knocked down, build back up, and start seeing how all these areas connect, both in gameplay and story. One of the most talked about things with this sequel is how much more voice work and story content there is. It's crazy massive, way bigger than the first game in terms of dialogue and characters you can meet. Tons tons of gods, ghosts, and monsters are fully voiced, and they react depending on how your runs go. That means the world feels fuller and more alive than just enemies to kill.
Beyond your comprehension, witch.
Okay, if I call you witch like that?
This game grew through early access in a way that few sequels do. Supergiant actually listened to community feedback for well over a year, shaping everything from boss fights to balance to how the boons, the power boosts you get, work. They even reworked some fan-favorite abilities so the game felt tighter and more cohesive, instead of just throwing things in and hoping they stick. And people are really playing it. On Steam, the player numbers actually doubled the peak of the first Hades when the full version launched, which is wild for a sequel like this. Players praise the mix of deep combat, replayability, and mythic world building, while critics have been calling it one of the best sequels of the year. If you know the original Hades, you'll feel at home here, but you'll also notice how much bigger the world is, how much deeper the systems go, and how much both story and mechanics have grown. It stands on its own even if you never touched the first game. That's rare for a sequel from a small team, and it's part of why Hades 2 has become such a defining indie/AA title in 2025.
That'll take more of them than you. Let's see how strong you really are.
Time would wait. This is it.
Tainted Grail: The Fall of Avalon is one of those RPGs that's trying something a bit nuts and ambitious, especially for an indie AA studio. It finally launched its full version on May 23rd, 2025, after being in early access since March 2023, so people had lots of time to get hyped and watch it grow before the full release hit consoles and PC. This game comes from Questline, a Polish developer backed by Awaken Realms, who earlier made Tainted Grail Conquest, a card game roguelite, and originally grew out of a Kickstarter board game universe that's been expanding since 2018. That means the world in this game has real lore roots, not just random fantasy stuff they slapped together. At its core, The Fall of Avalon is an open-world action RPG that blends a dark take on Arthurian legend with survival-style mechanics, branching narrative choices, real combat, and loads of systems you don't usually see together. You're dropped into Avalon centuries after King Arthur's reign, and the land is decaying under a strange force called the Weirdness, which twists reality and spawns monsters that are not friendly. You start the game in a pretty rough spot, imprisoned in a land that's literally falling apart, and from there, your journey can go in a dozen different directions. The story insists that your choices matter, not just in small cutscene changes, but in who lives, who dies, what factions rise and fall, and how the world itself ends. Some playthroughs will even unlock different endings and major world changes based on stuff you do early on. What's unusual here is how broad the gameplay feels. You're running around a huge open world split into big zones like the Misty Horns in the south, the sunny Kunokt village, and the frozen Forlorn Swords. Each area has quests, NPCs with their own stories, villages to save or ignore, dungeons buried with secrets, and tons of loot. There's crafting, fishing, cooking, mining, blacksmithing, and even a kind of journaling system that encourages you to soak in every detail you find. Combat is actually its own weird little beast too. You can mix and match melee weapons, bows, magic spells, shield play, and even primitive alchemy to shape how you fight. There's a mechanic called Weird Soul Power that functions almost like a resource outside of basic health. Using it right can turn a tough fight around, but mismanaging it can get you wrecked. Avalon itself doesn't feel like a static world either. At night, the weirdness grows stronger, twisting the land and enemies into something even nastier. So exploration comes with danger that isn't just bad guys in a field. You'll learn to watch the clock, manage survival gear, choose when to push forward or pull back, and deal with the consequences of either decision. The biggest draw for a lot of players is the branching narrative and replay value. The game doesn't railroad you. You can decide which factions to support, how to deal with moral dilemmas, and even what sort of ruler you might want Avalon to become in the end. There are multiple endings, and each feels like it actually changed something about the world you lived in. The world design and scale even draw comparisons to classic Elder Scrolls games, but with a very different tone, bleak, twisted, haunted by legend, and always feeling like Avalon might collapse around you at any minute. Reviews praise the story depth and exploration, even if some parts like performance and visuals are a bit rougher or inconsistent.
The heart that still beat beneath the weight of legend.
I need to this realm.
Sifu came out at a time when a lot of action games were getting easier, safer, and more forgiving, and this game did the exact opposite. It was made by Slowclap, the same studio that made Absolver, and you can tell this is a team obsessed with hand-to-hand combat. They are not trying to impress you with size or flashy set pieces, they are focused on feel, timing, and mastery. Sifu is built around the idea that getting good is the whole point. The story is simple on the surface. You are a martial artist going after 5 targets who destroyed your school and killed your family. There's no open world, no side quests, no filler. Each level represents a step in that revenge path, and each boss represents a different fighting philosophy. The game does not dump lore on you. It lets the environment, the dialogue, and the bosses do the talking. As you replay levels, you slowly realize this story is not just about revenge. It is about obsession and whether holding on to anger is actually worth the cost. The aging system is the core idea that makes Sifu stand out. Every death pushes your character forward in age. You get stronger but more fragile, which is a smart trade-off. It means brute forcing fights will only take you so far. You start caring about clean runs, not just survival. By the time you reach your 30s or 40s in a level, you feel the pressure. One bad room can end an entire run. That tension never goes away, even when you get better. Combat is where Sifu separates itself from almost everything else. This is not a button masher, and it is not trying to be cinematic. You are constantly managing structure, spacing, and enemy behavior. Dodging at the right angle matters more than mashing block. Enemies do not politely take turns, and group fights are where most players hit a wall. You are forced to control crowds, use the environment, and stay aware of everything happening around you. When the system clicks, fights flow in a way that feels smooth and controlled, almost like choreography. The level design supports this idea of mastery. You replay the same stages many times, but they never feel boring because you are the one changing, not the level. Shortcuts unlock, routes become faster, and rooms that once destroyed you turn into clean, efficient runs. The game respects repetition and assumes you are willing to learn, which is rare now. Visually, Sifu goes for a stylized look that ages well. It does not chase realism. The lighting, colors, and animations are clean and intentional. The martial arts animations are especially strong. You can tell Slowclap studied real movement. Hits feel grounded, not floaty, and enemy reactions sell every punch. Sifu fits into this modern wave of smaller studios making tight, focused games instead of bloated ones. It doesn't waste your time, but it demands your attention. By the end, the game feels less like something you beat and more like something you trained for. If you care about skill-based combat, clean design, and games that trust the player to improve, Sifu is one of the best examples of that philosophy in recent years. RoboCop Rogue City. This game is pure fan service done right, and it's the best adaptation of the original movie vibe that anyone could have asked for. It comes from Teon, the same developers who did the Terminator Resistance game, and they had this amazing knack for taking classic 80s action movies and translating their specific, gritty, ultra-violent atmosphere perfectly into a modern first-person shooter. The story is set between the second and third RoboCop movies, so it feels like a genuine lost chapter of the original trilogy. You are, obviously, Alex Murphy, the legendary cyborg lawman, and the game throws you right back into the crime-ridden streets of old Detroit. The big threat this time is a mysterious new crime lord, known only as the New Guy, who's trying to unite the city's gangs. The plot deals with all the classic RoboCop themes: Murphy's slowly returning humanity, the corporate greed of Omni Consumer Products, OCP, and the sheer satirical absurdity of late 80s action media.
Every gang in the city's out to pay back. You got the money, we've got the power.
What makes this game so damn satisfying is the gameplay. This is not a fast, twitchy shooter. You are playing as a 600-pound walking tank, and the game makes you feel that weight and power. RoboCop moves slowly, deliberately, and with an unstoppable momentum. When you draw your iconic Auto 9 pistol, it feels incredibly powerful and precise. You don't take cover, you are the cover. You can walk through walls, kick thugs across the room, and even use your environment, like grabbing a filing cabinet or an explosive barrel and throwing it right through a gang of enemies. It is supremely brutal and incredibly fun. The level design is fantastic because it's not all just shooting. You get to engage in detective work too. As RoboCop, you have to investigate crime scenes using your internal vision modes, gather evidence, and talk to witnesses and victims. This is where the light RPG elements come in. You gain experience and spend skill points on things like deduction to solve cases faster, combat to increase your damage, or even psychology to navigate the complex, often darkly funny dialogue choices. Your choices matter too. How you interact with the public and how you handle certain situations actually affects your reputation and your standing as a cop, which impacts the ending. It's a perfect blend of slow burn detective work, crunchy, heavy combat, and genuinely faithful storytelling that captures the exact tone of the first two films. Hi-Fi Rush is one of those games that shouldn't exist the way it does, and that's part of what makes it so interesting. It released back in January 2023 on Xbox and PC, and later came to PlayStation in March 2024, but people are still talking about it because it's one of those rare games that actually mixes two things you don't usually see together, rhythm and action combat, and makes both feel meaningful, not just gimmicky. The game was made by Tango Gameworks, the same folks who made The Evil Within and Ghostwire Tokyo. Those games were always about tension, horror, or big environments with weird enemies. Hi-Fi Rush feels like they threw that whole vibe out the window and decided to make something lighter, louder, and just plain fun. Honestly, it feels like the team just said, what if we made a game that feels like a music video and a beat-em-up had a baby, and then actually pulled it off? You play as Chai, who starts off as this goofy, up-and-coming rock musician who just can't catch a break. He gets pulled into this corporate experiment where a music player gets physically fused to his chest, like it becomes part of him, and suddenly the whole world around him starts moving to the beat of that music. That is the entire gag of the game, and it works because the combat, enemy movement, hazards, and almost everything in the world actually sync up with your soundtrack. If you time your hits to the rhythm, things feel good. If you don't, attacks still land, but it doesn't feel as satisfying. It's weirdly intuitive once you get into the flow. Mechanically, it's a third-person combat game, but rhythm isn't some tiny side thing. It's woven into how you win fights. Enemies move and attack on beat, so once you start noticing the rhythm patterns, the combat feels almost like playing a beat-matching game and a fighting game at the same time. You get combos, special moves, and finishers that hit harder when you're on time. That encourages you to listen to the music instead of just ignoring it while button mashing. You unlock new gear, new musical tracks, and new abilities that change how fights feel over time, so it doesn't just stay the same from start to finish. The characters you meet are a big part of why people remember this game. Chai gathers this odd crew of allies. Each one has their own personality and weird little animations that make you smile. That's something Tango has always been good at, giving characters real flavor without trying to be too deep. It's not about drama or tragedy. It's about a ragtag band of misfits figuring things out and having fun doing it. And the story is playful. It's not some long epic with million-dollar cutscenes. It's loose and funny, poking fun at corporate culture, at hero tropes, and at itself. The humor is light without being stupid, and that tone carries through the whole adventure.
We'll take down this company, one boss at a time.
There's also a weird history behind the game's existence that makes it even cooler. When Hi-Fi Rush launched, it got great reactions from players and critics, but pretty soon after, Microsoft announced Tango was being shut down. That freaked people out, because this game was one of the few recent action titles that felt fresh. Then, Krafton bought the studio and the Hi-Fi Rush rights, basically saving the team and keeping the game alive. That means the weird, joyful thing you play now exists because of a real drama behind the scenes, not just corporate press releases. If you think rhythm games have to be arrow prompts and strict timing bars, Hi-Fi Rush will change that idea. If you think action games have to be serious or gritty, this one flips that expectation too. It's goofy, smart, loud, and honestly just a blast to play even if you've never loved rhythm games before. Fiction is one of those games that feels like a real moment for cooperative gaming in 2025, especially because it comes from Hazelight Studios, the same studio behind It Takes Two and A Way Out, games that changed how people think about co-op experiences. This one didn't just follow the old formula, it threw it up in the air and built something that's way more varied and ambitious, and the way it blends storytelling, gameplay, and two-player mechanics is what most folks are still talking about months after launch. When Split Fiction dropped on March 6th, 2025 on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series S and X, and PC, players and critics kinda lost it. Within 2 days, it had sold over 1 million copies, and by May, it hit over 4 million worldwide, which is wild for an action-adventure game that requires 2 players. That alone says something. People are craving this kind of shared gaming experience, where you're not just grinding levels alone. The story is weird and fun, and honestly pretty smart. You control Mio Hudson and Zoe Foster, 2 writers with totally different styles. Mio is all sci-fi gadgets and cyberpunk vibes. Zoe is stuck in classic fantasy with dragons and magic. They get invited to test a device that's supposed to make their writing lives easier, but the machine glitches and traps them inside the worlds of their own stories. That means one minute you're running through a futuristic cyber city with laser swords, the next you're in a fantasy forest dodging trolls and riding dragons.
Yeah, nice shot!
The whole game feels like a buddy movie. You start off kind of annoyed with each other, but there's this road trip of weirdness where you slowly learn to cooperate and actually enjoy having your partner around. The narrative depends on how you and your friend bounce off each other, and all the level design reflects that push and pull between your characters. Gameplay is built around split-screen co-op only. You can't play this solo, and the developers made sure every level gives you something new to do. It's not like 2 characters with the same moves running around together. Each level changes the rules. Each character has abilities that matter differently, and the game constantly throws you new mechanics at you so it never feels stale. One moment might be platforming puzzles, the next you're dodging boss attacks or figuring out how to use both Mio's tech stuff and Zoe's fantasy skills together. The co-op mechanics are the heart of the game. It takes real coordination, not just standing next to each other, because puzzles and combat are designed so that you have to sync up, combine abilities, and watch each other's backs. This is why people say it feels like a ride, not just a game you play by yourself with someone else in the room.
Roadblock up ahead! Get lost, suckers!
Another thing that's kind of fun and a little nerdy is the way the game can reference other games and ideas inside its levels. Some players found a Dark Souls-style Easter egg hidden in a later chapter, which is the kind of strange thing that makes fans laugh and dig deeper. Even though most players love it, there are mixed feelings in some corners of the community. A few folks online have said the story feels a bit thin in the middle, or that some puzzles don't require as much teamwork as others. That's the kind of thing that happens when a game tries to throw everything it has at you instead of sticking to one core mechanic. Still, most people agree that the variety is the point. Every level feels like a new trip that keeps you guessing. So, Split Fiction isn't just another co-op game. It's kind of a statement about how story, gameplay, and cooperation can be intertwined, and how 2 players experiencing a game together can feel way more interesting than one person playing alone. If you care about games that make you communicate, laugh, argue, and solve problems together, this is one of the biggest hits of the year. Mafia: The Old Country is the 2025 return of the Mafia series, and it's a big deal because this franchise hasn't had a mainline entry in nearly a decade. It launched globally on August 8th, 2025 for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X/S, and PC, and it's a narrative-driven third-person action-adventure that throws you into 1900s Sicily long before the events of the first Mafia game. This one isn't about cruising around a giant open world. Instead, it's much more focused and story-driven. And and that was a deliberate choice by the developers at Hangar 13. The whole idea with the old country is to go back to basics, not remaking old Mafia games, but telling a meaningful origin story about how organized crime took shape in Sicily early in the 20th century. You play as Enzo Favara, a young man who grew up in brutal conditions, caught up in indentured labor, and eventually finds himself trying to climb the ranks of the Teresi crime family. You aren't some world-saving hero. You're an anti-hero trying to survive, earn respect, and handle loyalty, betrayal, and all the classic moral messiness that comes with Mafia life. One of the biggest things people immediately notice about this game is that it isn't an open-world sandbox like Mafia 3. Instead, it's a linear narrative experience, more in line with the first Mafia and Mafia 2, with chapters and set pieces that guide you through the story. You can wander a little bit here and there, and sometimes take side paths for things like collectibles or scenery, and a free ride mode was added after launch so you can roam more freely outside the main story if you want to take your time and just soak in Sicily. In terms of combat and mechanics, it blends third-person gunplay and some stealth elements with melee when the moment calls for it. You're not playing a shooter with modern complexity. This is early 20th century gangster stuff, so you're using period weapons like sawed-off shotguns, pistols, rifles, and knives in gritty, close quarters. Enemies don't just stand there waiting for you. They flank, they react to noise, and sometimes the best approach is to stay quiet until you have the advantage. Vehicles matter too, because Sicily is big, and terrain matters. You'll drive old-school cars and even ride horses to get around environments that range from crowded towns to rocky countryside. The world itself feels alive in a specific way. It's detailed and rough, with dusty streets, crowded marketplaces, and interiors that feel lived in and authentic to the time period. Hangar 13 went all in on Unreal Engine 5, which is the first time the series has used that engine, and that shows in lighting, animation, and environmental detail, even though some people online have argued that in places it still feels like old-school Mafia and not as modern or polished as other 2025 titles. Story-wise, a lot of the weight comes from the grind of survival and loyalty. Early Mafia games were famous for their cinematic storytelling and emotional beats, and the old country leans into that. Your choices might not branch off wildly, but the way you interact with key characters, how you handle orders, and the consequences of those choices shape how you experience the rise of Enzo. It's less about creating your own path and more about living the story the designers built, and a bunch of players have said that's exactly what they wanted, a tight, emotional crime saga that doesn't waste time with filler. The Altars is one of those survival games that feels weird but in a good way. Like someone took your normal base builder formula, added sci-fi weirdness, and then asked the question, what if your own alternate selves had to help you stay alive? And actually committed to it. It came out on June 13th, 2025 for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC, and was developed by 11-bit studios, the same people behind This War of Mine and Frostpunk, so you already know they like mixing survival mechanics with deeper emotional and philosophical ideas. You play as Jan Dulski, a miner and engineer whose expedition crashes on a harsh alien world where the sun's radiation will kill you if you don't keep moving and protect it. On the surface, it sounds like a typical survival loop. Gather resources, build and expand your base, manage food and parts, but the twist is that you can create versions of yourself called altars using this strange element called rapidium. These aren't just robot helpers or generic clones. Each altar represents a different path Jan's life could have taken, shaped by choices he actually might have made in another universe, and each one comes with its own personality, skills, fears, and emotional weight. The first time you see it in action, it's kind of unsettling in a cool way. You're literally facing different versions of Jan who disagree with each other, get scared, or have opinions about what you should do next. That makes the whole survival loop feel alive instead of just numbers on a screen. Some may be great engineers, others great at mining or building, and others good at research. You're constantly juggling resources and deciding who to create, who to send where, and who's emotionally stable enough to handle another day in the wheel of this rolling base. Speaking of your base, it's not a small hut. It's this giant circular rolling structure you have to keep moving across the planet's surface so you're not burned by the deadly sun. You mine resources, craft modules like research labs or social rooms, and expand the base piece by piece. But time is the most precious resource because the sun keeps rising and you need to be prepared before it does. That pressure of literally racing against time gives the game a constant low-key tension you don't see in many other survival games. This isn't just about numbers either. The Altars tries to make you think about choices and what they mean. Each altar you bring to life feels like a real person with emotional needs and opinions, so you have to balance their moods and relationships just to keep them doing their jobs. There's a branching narrative tied to all this. The decisions you make, who you create, who you help or ignore, and the paths you choose lead to different endings instead of just one. The gameplay loop has a lot going on. You'll explore outside for resources while managing hunger, radiation protection, and base upkeep, but you're also keeping track of who's broken down emotionally, who needs support, and which altars are going to help you unlock upgrades. It's a weird mix of survival, base building, personality drama, and even moral reflection on identity and life choices. Not something you see every day.
You're still making it about yourself. Just look at us.
Have you been ready?
Eriksholm: The Stolen Dream. Eriksholm: The Stolen Dream is a 2025 story-driven stealth adventure that feels like a grown-up indie tale with some old-school vibes wrapped around clever stealth and puzzle play. It was made by River End Games, a small Swedish studio with veterans from big projects like Battlefield, Little Nightmares, Mirror's Edge, and Unravel, which is wild when you think about it, because this game blends cinematic storytelling with tight, thoughtful stealth design in a way that you don't see a ton these days. The game dropped on July 15th, 2025 for PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC, and it's one of those titles that quietly built hype through demos and trailers before people even knew how good it really was. You play mostly in an isometric view, which means you're seeing everything from a kind of top-down angle that lets you look at guards, pathways, and puzzles in the world like you're scoping out a tabletop map, except it's not cute or simplistic. It's detailed, moody, and a bit gritty. The story starts super personal and grounded. You're introduced to Hannah, a young orphan in the city of Eriksholm whose brother Herman disappears after things go sideways with something he did. The city's already in decline because of a plague called Heartpox, and that backdrop gives the whole narrative this industrial-era fear mixed with desperation feel. It's not about saving a kingdom, it's about pulling yourself and the people you care about out of a mess that's bigger than you.
You and your brother. You said you're done with this, it's too dangerous, not what you wanted.
That's actually why I'm here.
Gameplay is rooted in stealth and strategy, but it's not just hide forever stealth. You're constantly moving through levels where guards patrol, paths wind, and every corner could have a secret or a danger. If someone spots you, it resets you to just before detection, so it rewards patience and pattern reading more than just brute force. You don't have guns or magic, you use shadows, timing, and your wits. That sense of tension actually makes encounters matter, even if the game isn't trying to be super hardcore. Pretty early on, the game expands the cast. After playing as Hannah for a while, you unlock two more characters, Alva and Sebastian, and each of them brings a new way of moving and solving problems. Hannah can squeeze through vents, Alva climbs drain pipes, and Sebastian can swim. Once all three are unlocked, you can switch between them on the fly to solve objectives in different ways, which feels smart because it opens up multiple paths through the same level. It stops the stealth from feeling linear and puts a bit more strategy back in your hands. The city of Eriksholm itself is inspired by early 20th century Scandinavian architecture. Think Nordic streets, industrial neighborhoods, cramped residential areas, and that setting really becomes a character in its own right. The visuals are crisp, the lighting and details pop thanks to Unreal Engine 5, and there's a real sense of place, even if the levels are on rails compared to some big open worlds. wakes the deep. If you have an appreciation for games that build tension through atmosphere and environment rather than constant shooting, this is a game from the Chinese room. And if you know their work, you know they are the masters of narrative-focused games that lean heavily into atmosphere, like Dear Esther and Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. This time, they're tackling pure claustrophobic survival horror, and it's a total head trip. The game is set in 1975, and you play as a guy named Kaz McLeary, who is working as an electrician on a giant, remote, and increasingly unstable oil rig called the Beira D. The setting alone is terrifying. You are miles out in the North Sea, surrounded by freezing black water, completely cut off from the mainland. Then, things go catastrophically wrong. The rig is hit by some kind of impossible, non-Euclidean horror, a creature or an influence that comes from the deep ocean and starts twisting the steel structure and the sanity of the crew. The unique terror of this game is that you have absolutely no way to fight back. This is not a combat game. Your only options are to survive, run, hide, and observe the terrifying collapse of your world. You spend the entire game navigating the labyrinthian, tight, and twisting corridors of the oil rig. You're crawling through maintenance ducts, shimmying along narrow catwalks suspended over the crashing waves, and swimming through flooded sections where the oxygen is running out. The environment itself is your enemy just as much as whatever monstrous thing is stalking the halls. The brilliance of the Chinese room's approach is how human and raw the story is. Kaz is just a regular guy, not some super soldier, and he's dealing with immense stress and fear. The voice acting is outstanding, delivered in strong Scottish and regional accents, which grounds the whole terrifying experience in a very real, relatable crew dynamic. You are constantly hearing the shouts and screams of your crewmates over the crackling radio, and you see the horrible things happening to them, but you can do nothing but try to save yourself and perhaps a few others. If you love games that use sound design, tight spaces, and a deep, character-driven story to generate genuine, paralyzing fear, then Still Wakes the Deep is a perfect example of modern, high-quality psychological horror. Pentiment is a very different kind of game, and it comes from Obsidian, a studio that has been around forever and is known for deep writing and choice-driven games. Instead of going big and cinematic, they went small, slow, and very focused. This game is set in 16th century Bavaria, during a time when religion, class, and power controlled every part of life. You play as Andreas Mahler, an artist working on manuscripts. Not a warrior, not a hero, just a smart guy who knows how to read, write, and observe people. What makes Pentiment stand out right away is the art style. The whole game looks like a living medieval manuscript. Text appears as if it is being handwritten in real time, characters look like drawings from old books, and the world feels like history come to life. This is not just a style choice, it fits the game perfectly. You feel like you are inside a history book, watching real people deal with real problems. The game is built around mystery and choice. Murders happen, secrets come out, and you are constantly asked to decide who to trust and what version of the truth you believe. The key thing is that you are never given perfect answers. Evidence can be incomplete, witnesses can lie or be wrong, time moves forward no matter what you do, and some choices lock you out of others. You cannot see everything in one playthrough, and the game is very honest about that. There is no combat at all. Everything is handled through dialogue, investigation, and decision-making. Who Andreas is depends on how you shape him. His background, education, and interests affect how he talks to people and what options you get. Being kind or aggressive, curious or dismissive, all of it changes how characters react to you over the years. And yes, years matter here. The game spans decades, and you see characters age, change, regret things, and carry old wounds. What Pentiment does really well is show how class and power work. Peasants, monks, nobles, and outsiders all live in the same town, but they live very different lives. The game never lectures you, it just shows how unfair things are and lets you sit with it. Some choices feel wrong no matter what you do, and the game does not try to comfort you. Pentiment came out in an era where most games chase action and speed, so this feels almost rebellious. It trusts the player to slow down, read, and think. The writing is sharp, the characters feel human, and the consequences stick. This is not a game you play for thrills. You play it because you want something thoughtful and mature. If you are tired of bloated open worlds and endless combat, Pentiment feels like a breath of fresh air. It proves that a game can be quiet, smart, and deeply engaging without explosions or boss fights. It is one of the most unique AA games of recent years, and nothing else really feels like it. Goodnight Universe is part of this newer wave of indie games that aren't trying to win you over with combat systems or big mechanics, but with perspective. It comes from Nice Dream, the same small team that made Before Your Eyes, and if you know that game, you already know what kind of space they operate in. They're not interested in power fantasies. They're interested in memory, family, identity, and how games can make you feel present in a moment instead of just watching it play out. You play as Isaac, a baby. Not a funny baby, not a cartoon baby, but an actual infant who can't talk, can't walk, and barely understands the world. That alone already sounds like a bad idea on paper, but the twist is that Isaac starts developing telekinetic and psychic abilities. The game is told entirely from his point of view, so everything feels low to the ground, oversized, confusing, and intimate in a way most games never even try. The story isn't about saving the world. It's about family. Isaac's parents are flawed, stressed, tired people. His older sister feels real, not written like a sitcom character. There's love in the house, but also tension, arguments, fear, and misunderstanding. On top of that, there's a tech company that becomes interested in Isaac's abilities, and that's where the game starts mixing personal family drama with something darker and more uncomfortable. It's not subtle in a fake way, but it also doesn't scream its themes at you.
Not even playing with my powers. Not even looking at Gilbert.
What really makes Goodnight Universe stand out is how you interact with it. Like Before Your Eyes, the game uses camera and face tracking if you want. Your eyes, your head movements, even your expressions can control things. You look at objects to move them. You focus your gaze to activate powers. Sometimes just looking at something for too long changes what happens. And the important part is that this isn't just a gimmick slapped on top. It actually fits the idea of being a baby, where your main way of interacting with the world is attention, not action. You're not pressing buttons to swing swords. You're paying attention. You're observing, you're reacting, and that changes how the pacing feels. The game forces you to slow down. If you try to rush it, it doesn't really work. It's designed around moments, not systems. From a design point of view, this is very much a narrative-first game, but it's smarter than most walking simulators. There are puzzles, light exploration, and moments where your powers grow and change how you interact with rooms and people. It never turns into an action game, and it doesn't want to. The tension comes from emotional stakes, not enemies.
When they walk in that door, you're not going to yell. When they walk in that door, I am not going to yell. You need to explain yourself to me right goddamn now!
Visually, the game keeps things grounded. It's not flashy. The environments feel lived in. Messy rooms, toys on the floor, dim lighting at night, quiet moments where nothing happens except breathing and background noise. Sound design does a lot of heavy lifting here. You hear muffled voices, distant arguments, household sounds, and it all adds to that feeling of being small in a big world you don't fully understand yet. What's interesting is how this game fits into the current indie scene. We're seeing more studios explore perspective-based storytelling, where the mechanics exist mainly to reinforce how the story feels. Goodnight Universe sits right alongside games like Pentiment or The Altars in that sense. Very different genres, but the same mindset. Use the medium properly. Do something that only games can do. Reception-wise, people who bounce off slow narrative games probably won't love this, and that's fine. This isn't trying to convert action fans, but for players who enjoy story-driven experiences that trust the audience to sit with uncomfortable emotions, Goodnight Universe lands hard. A lot of players talk about finishing it and just sitting there for a bit, not because of shock value, but because it feels personal in a quiet way. At the end of the day, Goodnight Universe isn't here to impress you, it's here to connect with you. It's one of those games where the mechanics disappear after a while and you're just inside the experience. No big set pieces, no forced drama, just a strange, intimate story told from a perspective games almost never use, made by a studio that clearly understands why interactivity matters.
They will take care of you.
What the hell?
And then, when you're ready, they will get you home.
Bramble the Mountain King is one of those games that looks cute for the first 10 minutes and then slowly shows you it is absolutely not playing around. It came out in 2023, made by a small Swedish studio called Dimfrost Studio, and it pulls heavily from dark Nordic folklore, not the Disney version, the old stories where bad things happen, kids disappear, and monsters don't feel sorry for you. You play as a young boy named Ale, searching for his sister after she gets taken into a strange forest world. That setup sounds simple, almost fairy tale-like, but the game quickly makes it clear that this world is cruel, unfair, and dangerous. Ale is small, weak, and completely out of place. That feeling never really goes away, and that's very much on purpose. Gameplay-wise, Bramble is a linear story game with light platforming, simple puzzles, stealth sections, and a few boss fights. You're not learning combos or builds, you're just trying to survive. Movement is basic, jumps are slow, and combat is limited. At first, that might feel stiff, but it actually fits the story. You're a kid, you're not meant to feel strong or smooth. What really makes Bramble stand out is how it uses scale and fear. Enemies are often huge compared to you. Bosses feel like forces of nature instead of enemies you can outplay. When you die, it usually feels like you messed up by being careless, not because the game cheated you. You're meant to move slowly, watch patterns, and stay scared. The world design is surprisingly detailed. Forests feel thick and alive. Swamps feel heavy and rotten. Caves feel tight and uncomfortable. The game uses lighting really well, especially shadows and darkness. Sometimes you're not scared because something jumps out, but because you know something is nearby and you can't see it yet. The monsters are straight out of old Scandinavian stories. Trolls, witches, spirits, and creatures that feel wrong just by looking at them. Some designs are honestly disturbing. Not in a loud horror way, but in a quiet, this should not exist way. The game doesn't over-explain them either. They just are what they are, and that makes them feel more real. Storytelling in Bramble is mostly visual and environmental. There is some narration, but a lot of the story comes from what you see happening around you. The game trusts the player to connect the dots. It doesn't spell everything out, which is refreshing, especially compared to games that stop every 5 minutes to explain emotions. One thing Bramble does really well is tone control. It gives you calm moments, peaceful music, and beautiful scenery, then slowly twists it into something dark. It reminds you that fairy tales were never meant to be comforting, they were warnings. That contrast is what makes the darker moments hit harder. The music and sound design deserve credit too. The soundtrack is quiet and moody most of the time, letting nature sounds and silence do the work. When music does come in, it usually signals danger or emotional weight. Nothing feels random. Every sound feels placed on purpose. This game came out during a time when a lot of indie and AA studios were making short, focused story games, and Bramble fits that era perfectly. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It knows what story it wants to tell and sticks to it. The whole experience is tight, controlled, and clearly made with care, even if the gameplay itself is not deep or complex. Bramble isn't for people looking for freedom, choices, or replay value. It's a straight path from start to finish. But if you care about atmosphere, dark storytelling, and games that feel uncomfortable in a meaningful way, this one hits hard. It's not scary because it screams at you. It's scary because it reminds you how small you are in a world that doesn't care. Road 96 has a setup but simple but strong. You're a teenager in a fictional country called Petria, which is basically falling apart. The government's corrupt, people are angry, and the country is heading toward an election that feels dangerous instead of hopeful. Every character you play is trying to escape and reach the border, and the road to that border is the entire game. What's important is this: you don't play one hero, you play many different teens one after another. When one reaches the border or dies or gives up, the game jumps forward in time and you start again as someone else. That structure alone already makes Road 96 feel different. It's not about winning, it's about experiencing a country through broken pieces of people. Gameplay-wise, it's a mix of walking, dialogue choices, light puzzles, and small mini-games. There's no combat system, no skill trees, no loot grind. Your main tools are decisions and attitude. How you talk to people matters, whether you're polite, angry, scared, selfish, or brave actually changes how scenes play out. Sometimes it helps you, sometimes it backfires. One of the coolest things about Road 96 is how randomized but intentional it feels. Each run pulls from a pool of scenes, characters, and events, but they're written in a way that slowly builds a bigger picture. You'll meet the same characters again and again across different teams, but in different situations and moods. Over time, you start understanding who they are, what they want, and how messed up the system around them really is.
To be armed and very dangerous. If you see them, please call the police immediately.
We're laughing stocks.
The characters are honestly the heart of the game. You've got truck drivers, rebels, weird conspiracy people, government supporters, and kids who just want to survive one more night. Some of them are funny, some annoying, some sad, some straight up dangerous. None of them feel perfect, and that's the point. The writing feels messy in a human way, not polished like a movie script. The political side of the game is always there, but it doesn't lecture you. You see propaganda posters, you hear arguments on the radio, you watch people disagree with each other in real time. The game lets you lean into rebellion, support the system, or stay neutral, and none of those paths are clean or heroic. It reflects how real political tension actually feels when you're young and powerless. Mechanically, Road 96 also does something smart by tying progress to the country, not the character. Skills like persuasion, hacking, or stamina carry across runs. That makes each teen feel fragile, but the overall journey feel meaningful. You're learning, adapting, and slowly understanding how to survive longer on the road.
Freedom. Nothing is more important, but there are many others in Petra still looking for it.
The music deserves its own mention. It's one of the reasons people remember this game. The soundtrack mixes road trip vibes, synth, indie, and moody tracks that perfectly fit the feeling of being alone at night with nowhere to go. A lot of scenes hit harder simply because of the music playing underneath them. Visually, the game doesn't aim for realism. It's stylized, slightly exaggerated, almost dreamlike at times. That works in its favor because Road 96 isn't trying to be a documentary. It's a feeling. Long roads, empty gas stations, cheap motels, police checkpoints, and quiet moments staring out into nothing. This game came out during a time when a lot of indie devs were experimenting with procedural storytelling, and Road 96 is one of the better examples of that idea done right. It's not perfectly balanced, and some scenes definitely hit harder than others. Some dialogue can feel on the nose. Some runs feel stronger than others, but that unevenness almost adds to the experience. Not every journey is supposed to feel the same. Road 96 isn't a power fantasy. You don't save the world. You don't fix the system. You just try to get through it. And somehow, that makes it more honest than a lot of bigger games that pretend choice always leads to victory. It's the kind of game you finish, think about for a bit, and then realize it stuck with you more than you expected. Not because it shocked you, but because it felt real in a quiet, uncomfortable way.
Ah!